everybody, it's Bob Ost. It's September 29th and a rainy day in New York, really a stormy rainy day. It's very gloomy out there, but the weather is delightful inside in the community chat room here with all of my friends. So this is what we call a community chat. This is something that started April 17th, 2020. There was something that happened back then, which you may not remember. It was called COVID. It was called quarantine, shutdown. We'd had no way of actually being together live, and we had no way of doing my programs live. So I had to really adapt to Zoom. And I opened up at the suggestion of people that were part of TRU. I opened up a Zoom room, and people have been coming in every week. This is actually our 175th consecutive community gathering today. We've evolved in the past 3 years. At first, basically, we were talking about dealing with a pandemic and trying to be creative when you want to just go into your room and pull the covers off over your head. We talked about a lot of different things, different aspects of creativity, creating in different ways than we were used to creating because we were in a different circumstance. So there were a lot of things that we were talking about for the past couple of years. But now we're sort of back to normal. Sort of back to normal means that we're not in quarantine. We're not ostensibly in a pandemic, although I think everybody knows that COVID's still there. It's still with us. I can tell you for a fact that it's still with us because the fourth time I got it, yes, I said that, was July 1st. So I'm a recent COVID person. So everybody, just as a way of telling you to be aware of the fact that it's still there, it's still with us. Be careful, be considerate of people around you, all that. Our conversations have tried to get back to normal in the same way that theater has tried to get back to normal. Although we're back in live performance and we're acting as if things were back to normal, we're not getting the audiences that we used to get, and things are really not quite back to what they were before the pandemic. Some of this is due to things that were actually trends that were happening prior to the pandemic. It's not all because of COVID. But one of the things that has become painfully obvious, even before shutdown, was how difficult it was to make theater happen, how expensive it was to put on a show, commercially or anywhere. Regional theaters were also having problems as well. So we're always welcoming conversations about alternate routes, ways of doing things that are not quite $8 to $25 million costs. So one of the things that I'm familiar with and that I've worked in, I've developed shows myself through Cabaret, is Cabaret. We had the idea to bring in some of the luminaries of our cabaret world, including Sherry Eaker and Sidney Myer, plus two new people that I wasn't as friendly with. I've known Sherry and Sidney for a century. I don't know. It's a long time. Max and Michael are here because they were also involved in developing a show through Cabaret. So I want to bring all my guests in. I don't usually have this many guests, but I'm having abundance. I'm celebrating abundance, an abundance of guests today. So welcome Sherry Eaker, welcome Sidney Myer, Michael Chase Gosselin, who I've been given permission to call Chase, so I'm going to call him Chase, and Max Friedman. Nice to meet you guys. Quick overview of your backgrounds, and then we're going to get into some specific conversations. Why don't we start with you Max? And I'm going to work my way to Sidney and to Sherry at some point. Since I don't know you the least, you get to start. So there.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. I am primarily a director. I've worked in many capacities in the art world. I have directed extensively off-Broadway and in Cabaret. I was the associate director on the Broadway musical Be More Chill.
By the way, Joey Econis was a lovely guest. I had him on here. We talked about his journey. So good guy.
Yeah, Joe's one of my longtime friends. I've worked on a large number of Joe's musicals throughout the years, and some of his cabaret work as well. I directed his Lincoln Center songbook concert a couple years ago. I also direct in the music business. I've done a bunch of creative direction and production design for rock and roll bands and pop stars for their touring productions. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay.
Also, actually, I'll mention one other thing, which is just that for several years in my 20s, I had the good fortune of being an assistant, a booking manager to Sidney at Don't Tell Mama. So I do know the cabaret world from the inside, as well as the musical theater world from the inside.
Well, that's a relevant piece of information that I didn't have.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very good. Chase, you're up now. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi. So yeah, I'm originally from Vermont. I grew up in Vermont on the Canadian border. I ran a theater company up there for many years. Started as a director. It wasn't until I moved to New York that I got more into the producing side of things. I worked for Cameron Mackintosh for a period, actually as a director developing a show, but working with him sort of started to interest me in kind of the management and producing side of things. And I started to produce initially at the smaller scale. I was doing stuff at like the New York Musical Festival and stuff like that. Along the way, one of the shows I found was a show that Max had been developing called Midnight at the Never Get, which started at Don't Tell Mama, and has been one of the most kind of fulfilling, exciting pieces I've ever had the opportunity to work on, and has led to a lot of different opportunities over the year. Anyway, along the way, I created a company called Visceral Entertainment that I run and operate with a guy named Tim Salka, who used to work in the Dodgers office. He was a associate company manager at Jersey Boys, and done a number of other things. But we created our business to focus primarily on off-Broadway work, though we've done tours and international productions and regional shows. Most recently off Broadway, we've been the general manager for Stranger Sings, a show called Americano that ran at New World Stages last year. We were the lead producers of Emojiland off Broadway right before the pandemic, and a number of other things. Yeah, but most of my time these days is spent general managing and producing, occasionally directing, but mostly on the producing side of things now.
And I don't know if you know it or not. You probably do know, but Theater Resources Unlimited, are one of our prime focuses is on the business side of theater and helping nurture and develop producers. So let's move to Sidney Myer. I probably have known you longest of everybody here, probably in the world. I mean, I've known you forever. Good to see you. Good to have you here.
Yes, it's lovely to be here.
There you are. So tell us a little, for the three people who don't know who you are, the ones that are in Malaysia, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I've been a booking manager of Cabaret for 40 years at Panache and Rose's Turn, but since the late 1980s, Don't Tell Mama. And to your specific point today, which I can speak to later, we've had two original musicals really hit it through the years. One was called Honky Tonk Highway, which won the MAC Award and the Bistro Award, and I can get into that, and went to Goodspeed, etc. That's an interesting story. And the most recent is the incredible show that Max Friedman, who is a genius, that's all there is to it. If anyone needs a director, I am telling you, run. He brought this original musical by two Yale graduates, Midnight at the Never Get. It started at Don't Tell Mama. It went to the New York Music Festival, whatever that was. It had a great run in Provincetown, where it picked up producers, and then an incredible run at the York Theater, where it got a rave in the New York Times, and it got two of Cabaret's highest accolades, the Bistro Award and the MAC Award for Show of the Year. And all this began in a little room on 46th Street.
Well, another show that you didn't mention was Nonsense. Nonsense started at Don't Tell Mamas too. Do you remember that?
And also the original Duplex.
Oh, the Duplex was it? That's what it was. Right. Yeah. Because I remember, I I always use nonsense as a touchstone for all this. We're going to come back to Midnight at the Never Again. We're going to get more specific. First, I wanted to have like a broader conversation about cabaret and the history of cabaret. And so who better to talk about that than Sherry Eaker, who
I don't know who
basically own the cabaret world.
No. I started, I was the editor of Backstage for over 30 years. I began in 77, and then in the early 80s, I started getting lots of press releases about all these singers singing at small little rooms that I had not heard of. And I said, I've got to give all these places coverage, because we were well known Backstage for covering a lot of off and off-Broadway productions. So I found the perfect writer to do this, as many people, especially Sidney, knows his name, Bob Harrington. He began writing reviews for me. What happened? I'm looking at your face and I'm saying, uh-oh, maybe he didn't give Bob Ost a good review.
No, he was a dear friend. He was one of my greatest supporters when I first came to New York.
Well, he was one of Cabaret's greatest supporters.
Yeah.
So first he was just writing individual reviews, and then we turned it. My dad, who began Backstage, would every once in a while do a review, and the slug above it was called Bistro Bits. I said, Bob, that's what we're going to name your column. So we began a regular weekly bistro column reviewing cabaret, but beyond reviewing, Bob would use reviews as a textbook for how to go about the business of cabaret, from all aspects, from the actual talent involved to the business aspects of it. In 1984, at the end of the year, he said, what about producing an awards show? Well, we didn't have a show, but we started, which became the Bistro Awards. We started announcing the recipients of Bob's Bistro Awards in Backstage. And that continued. And then in 1990, we had our first formal show at 88. Over the years, we went from 88 to, Sidney, help me.
The ballroom.
The ballroom, that's right. The ballroom, from the ballroom to the supper club, which is now the Edison Ballroom, and we're at Gotham Comedy Club right now. We also, Bob, you mentioned that you started this community gathering during the pandemic, and I started our newsletter during the pandemic. I haven't counted how many of them I've done so far. I don't think I'm up to 175 yet. But I have a team of writers. It could always be a larger team of writers because there's plenty of cabaret shows going around. And
is that a hint to the writers in the room?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Actually.
I thought I'd pull it out just so people can look at it.
I didn't want to be so in your face about it.
That's why I thought I would help.
But we regularly review cabaret. We produce our annual show, which is coming up to be this year, next year, 2024. It'll be our 39th annual Bistro Awards. And we do features. In fact, this past Monday, we did a feature on songwriters, and Joe Iconis was one of our featured songwriters. And we're featuring, Bob, are you still there?
I'm still there, but somebody came in. All right. Sorry about that.
But we cover all aspects of the business. Features, the week before was about directors and the growing need for directors. Never, a lot of people think of cabaret as, well, as nightclub singers, where you just go in with a set list and perform a bunch of songs. But it's become so much more refined. It's become so much more sophisticated. And actually, most of the shows do tell a story, whether it's subtly told or, you know, less than subtly
Overtly,
told.
overtly.
Overtly.
I'm glad you're saying that. I'm really glad you're saying this, because one of the things that's always interested me, you know, I've been in the cabaret world in the past. I haven't been in recent years, but I've always been interested in developing shows rather than sets of songs. And I've directed people. I've had people who have come to me, and I've helped them shape shows. Everybody, Sidney, you know very well that I worked with Vicki Phillips a lot, and basically I'm known for having her burst into tears at rehearsals with me, because I've forced her to look at things deeply. So that's been
She's
my
past Bistro Award winner, Vicki.
Yeah, Vicki, and a very dear friend, and former board member of TRU as well. So I'm really glad that you're talking about that, because there is a difference. I think part of the evolution of cabaret into a recognized medium for helping to develop actually scripted shows is the fact that so many shows started actually thinking, instead of like song sets, thinking in terms of themes and a script. There's actually
And
a script.
it has slowly evolved. I mean,
Yeah.
it changed. Sydney, maybe somewhere in the mid-'80s, this started happening, where people hired directors and wanted to tell their story. Cabaret has opened up its world. There's you can go to a cabaret and see a non-musical show. There are just storytellers now. It's just widened its scope.
So,
And
well, Sidney, you actually focused on Midnight at the Never Get, which we're going to give a lot of time to a little later. But think back on, what are some of the shows that you thought were moving cabaret a little bit more towards theater over the years that have been in Don't Tell Mama? Or if you ever do you ever go anywhere else? Do you ever go to the other clubs?
Sidney, I'll vouch for that. Sidney is
Okay.
elsewhere.
I can't imagine, because he spends all his time in Don't Tell Mama. When could he go anywhere? Did you even eat?
Well, I do try to see and support all our alumni, and we have so many people that have began and gotten their first New York experience and exposure on the Don't Tell Mama stage. And may I just add, everyone from Jonathan Larson, who of Rent fame, Jason Robert Brown, who was on the staff at Don't Tell Mama, Carol Hall, John Wallowich, Stephen Lutvak, who won the Tony for Gentleman's Guide, all Chris Curtis, who did Chaplin. They all used to do their cabarets and talk about these projects they were working on. In Stephen Lutzbach's case, it took 18 years, but it got to Broadway. As far as one show of note that I mentioned previously was called Honky Tonk Highway, and this is such a lesson, because it was a group of actors, I think equity actors. They were doing an original musical, or a musical based on the life of the country legend Hank Williams. And right up to the last minute before it started, they had the consent of the family. And then for whatever reason, the family pulled the rights, but that did not stop them. They created an original musical about Hank Williams, very similar in regard to what Bette Midler did in The Rose with Janis Joplin. It was based on the life, but it was never said, but it was virtually the story. So they created this musical called Honky Tonk Highway. It played in the old front room at Don't Tell Mama. It had 125 performances. All the cast played instruments on, and they used the piano, the grand piano, as everything from a car where they lifted up the hood to a picnic table. And to show you how long ago it got a review in the New York Times by Ben Brantley. He was covering cabarets then, hello? And he wrote that they made admirable use of the tiny stage. Well, it went after 125 performances, it was picked up by Goodspeed and had a fabulous run there. And along the way, it did win the Mac Award and the Bistro Award. It had an extension at Goodspeed of 11 weeks and is still seen all over the country, from Tampa, everywhere. It was picked up by small theaters. And the producers of that, and this was 30 years ago, have often stated this would have never gotten off the ground except for Cabaret, only because the economics were so high. Even renting the smallest theater, you have to bring in the piano, the lighting, the box office. All of that stuff is in place in Cabaret. So they brought it in at a fraction of what they would have had to invest in another setting, with all due respect. And so many people have continued that through the years. And the classic recent example in this century is Midnight at the Never Get.
Okay, and we're gonna get. We'll go to that now, okay? Because I want to ask Chase and also Max, from your point of view, was it a conscious choice or an inevitable choice to start this show in Cabaret? Did it come to you with the idea that it was going to be in Cabaret, or did one of you have the idea that, oh, this would be a good way to develop this piece?
Yeah, I'll start with this. Very much it was designed to be a cabaret. I had pretty recently begun my tenure working at Don't Tell Mama with Sidney. I was working with a writer named Mark Sonnenblick. We were brainstorming ideas, and first we presented just a concert of songs that Mark had written throughout the years that were otherwise, trunk songs, I guess we'd call them. He had written them throughout his time in Yale, or he had written them for bands that he was in, or just sort of, he wrote a couple of new songs, and we presented it as an evening where we really looked at like what cabaret is all about, and we called it Wasted Tunes, because the idea that people would drink and be, a word that was used earlier very well, convivial, and that also otherwise would have maybe gone to waste. And so that was sort of my first opportunity to collaborate with Mark, who had previously been just a friend and a talent I admired. And then shortly thereafter, he had been approached by a great actor named Sam Bolin, who had the idea, truly, and this is something I really hasn't been discussed too much anywhere in the world, so you're getting a little bit of like real insider information, but when Marvin Hamlish passed away, we were just really struck by this idea that somebody who had breathed so very much life and music into the world had passed. And I think that sort of got Mark and Sam thinking about creating a show about a fictional composer and writing songs in a style of the past, and trying to tell that writer's life story in a creative way, in spite of the fact that it was pure fiction. Midnight at the Never Get, for all intents and purposes, began its life at Don't Tell Mama. But I should also mention that the very first sort of germination of it began at the Musical Theater Factory, where we were all sort of founding members, and it was really this very loose idea. And in fact, it was this idea of follow me if you can. You'll see why this all changed, but it was originally the ghost of a drag queen who was going to enter a piano bar, and on the night of this composer's passing, while a fabulous thing was happening uptown at Lincoln Center, this drag queen was going to, the ghost of a drag queen was going to bewitch the fingers of the piano player in this empty piano bar into playing these songs that they didn't, that no one had ever heard. And it was going to tell this love story between this ghost of a drag queen and this composer. that was the version, we presented the first 15 minutes of at Musical Theater Factory. Kind of realized that the songs were just terrific, really great songs, but that the idea needed a lot of work, and how could we present it and make it something that was palatable to audiences and really exciting and dynamic. And kind of what happened was me and Mark had a meeting, and in the original room at Don't Tell Mama, in the austere black mirrored ghostly sort of realm of the original room at Don't Tell Mama. And we had the idea of that this could be a show that was both a nightclub act and a memory play, and be both those things simultaneously, and sort of uncompromisingly be both of those things. And that was sort of how we came up with the draft that we worked on for a long time, for about 1.5 years before anyone ever saw it. We spent 2 or 3 afternoons a week using the free space that was provided to me by my my role at Don't Tell Mama, and we conceived of and created a musical. And we really didn't think of presenting it at Don't Tell Mama in any way as a stepping stone to anything. Certainly we hoped that it would live on, but we really were very focused on the presentations we were intending to do at Don't Tell Mama as ends to themselves. That we were going to create this show that was going to be unlike anything the audience had seen, and but was really a cabaret show and a musical all at once. And when we first presented the show, we were very fortunate that Chase came and saw it, because then Chase saw the larger vision, and I think saw that what we all sort of felt internally, me, Mark, and Sam, was that the world we were creating centered around this fictional club where this composer and this singer we got rid of the drag queen element, and it just became a singer. And we actually realized we realized that was more, it was actually much more interesting to learn about a gay love story in the era of history that we were writing about, which was the sort of pre-Stonewall 60s in Greenwich Village.
So let me ask you, who was the book writer for this?
Mark Sonnenblick wrote the book, music, and the lyrics. Sam Boland conceived of the character of Trevor Copeland and of Arthur Brightman, and sort of had the ideas that became the show.
So Chase, let me ask you, prior to Midnight at the Never Get, had you been working at all in cabaret? Had you been conscious, aware of it?
Well, certainly aware of it, but and I, attended occasionally, but had not developed something in cabaret or really seen anything that went beyond kind of someone doing their cabaret show and telling their own personal life story. And I didn't even really realize when I was going to see Midnight at the Never Get what it was initially. My connection to it was through Sam Boland, the star of it. I had previously, I think the year before, I had produced a show at the New York Musical Festival called Pope, the musical, which was Sam starred as this sort of young Pope, very crazy kind of musical comedy. And I thought he was an amazing talent, and he invited me to come see this a year later, and I really thought I was just seeing Sam do a cabaret show of songs written by this composer. I had no clue that what I was coming to see was a musical, and in fact, I don't know how intentional this was from their part, but I, Max, remember it being sort of. It almost felt intentionally unclear what people were coming to see. It was almost a bit of a mystery, if you will. At least that's how it kind of came across to me. And
well, I think the title itself sort
is
of
very mysterious. Yeah.
Yeah. Midnight at the Never Get. Sure. I know what that's about.
Mystique can be a very powerful tool.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And honestly, in our current society, Mystique is an underdeployed weapon in the arts. People love to give everything away, and I think that it's actually very important not to do that. I think that what you leave for the audience to experience only from the moment they sit in the seats is really important. And so, as Chase said, it was very, very intentional that the show was just sort of a gray graphic with this title and our names on it, but we really weren't sort of like pushing the idea that it was, more than a cabaret show.
And at that time, I think it sort of existed in this kind of in-between space where it was a musical, but it wasn't as much of a musical as it became in the following years, I think. But
so I want to extrapolate from the specific. I mean, we're talking specifically about a show. I've got a room full of people who have properties that they want dearly to eventually get to a commercial production. And what can you tell them in terms of using cabaret as a stepping stone? Sidney actually gave some very good, concrete, specific information about the dollars and cents of using cabaret. But let me hear it from your perspective, producer Chase.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I will say as someone that was still early, fairly early in my producing career at the time, what excited me, well, I should start by saying that, I mean, I just fell head over heels in love with the show itself. It sort of completely baffled me in some ways.
Okay, so first thing to the room, find somebody to fall head over heels in love with your show.
Yes,
that's step one.
But the on the economic side of things, there was sort of this unique opportunity to pick up what felt to me like a very important new piece of theater. It felt like, in terms of like LGBTQ history, it could be kind of up there with Angels in America in terms of its like importance in, kind of the list of shows that, we could all rattle off that kind of tell that history over the years. So it felt important to me like that. And it also, the music, I thought, Mark had just created a score that was so uniquely brilliant and original and unlike anything I had really heard. And but then there was also this other component, which was that it was incredibly small. You had two guys and a piano and a small band on stage. Eventually, we added a third component, a third role to the show, but it stayed very, very small. And for me, looking for opportunities to produce and kind of get things off the ground, it did present a really unique opportunity to do something that didn't require raising hundreds of thousands of dollars initially, at least. The very first production of it we did was at, once again, the New York Musical Festival. And I think, if I remember correctly, it cost $30,000, which, these days a reading of a musical tends to cost $25,000-$30,000.
So I think I'm unclear about the time frame. So
yeah.
You said, so you're talking about Midnight at the Never Get. Was in Nymph?
At Nymph in 2016, I think it was.
Oh wow, okay. I didn't realize it went that far back. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it was sort of it wasn't a full production. It was this kind of strange opportunity that had sort of fallen in my lap at the time. I had a good relationship with the staff there. I had done a lot of work, and they had a show fall out in their sort of event space, if you will. There was the space that used to be called 42 West, which was previously at the Out Hotel, which I think it was the Playboy Club for a while. I don't know what it is now, but it's a space that's been a whole bunch of things. And that year, Nymph was using it as sort of their opening night party and closing night party. And they were having various performances booked in there that were not full shows. And so it struck me as a unique opportunity to say, okay, we'll jump in there and do this. And it's sort of a perfect setup for us. It was a dark room with sticky floors and, kind of everything you would want, this kind of ancient cabaret history piece to kind of feel. And it was great because, again, I mean, I think, again, 30,000, I believe, is the number that rings in my memory. And
it probably was because that was
the maximum.
For
costing $100,000 at the time. So
yeah, because at the time that was the maximum that equity would allow you to spend on what is essentially was a showcase.
So
contract.
We were not even. I'm trying to remember, Max, the specifics of this, but if I remember correctly, we were on some strange kind of hybrid code that Nymph had that was not for the full production. So we were not on a showcase code.
Every year of Nymph, there was a concert series and a reading series in addition to their full productions. And just by virtue of what our show was, and we were able to do it on their contract, their concert contract.
Yeah.
because we were in there we were not in an equity theater, we were in a concert venue, and while it was an opportunity for us to grow and add designers and design elements to what we had created at Don't Tell Mama, with just sort of the tech staff there, and we rented our costumes from the TDF costume rental when we did it at Don't Tell Mama. Like, we were able to expand, but still using their concert code, not their showcase code.
Correct. That's
So
exactly.
let
I'd
me
like
ask
to
you.
say something. It may be misleading to when it's being said that it's not a full production. It was the entire show. Every time it has been presented, from
Yeah.
Don't Tell Mama to that festival, by the way, where Sherry and her team of writers viewed it, and I think it got the Bistro Award that very night. And every time it's been shown in Provincetown, at the York Theater in Manhattan, there may be different design elements and everything and bigger bands, but it's always been the full Midnight at the Never Get. And may I say, as Chase was like the godfather of this, that all the people involved were in their early to mid 20s. And the other, which was fascinating to me about their wisdom, the music was not a knockoff of 60s songs or pop songs by Frank Sinatra or Peggy Lee. They were the genuine article. They were first class. And Mark Sonnenblick has gone on to receive numerous accolades and grants ongoing after doing that production. It's just an amazing, brilliant score and story. And while there are numerous, thankfully, stories about the gay liberation cause and everything that followed, including, the AIDS pandemic and all of that, what was unique was this script, and these characters were in the early 60s. That's where it began, before Stonewall and all that. So it really was a window into this time, into gay people's lives and careers in the Village and Hollywood. It was remarkable and remains that way.
So the thing that I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to pull it away from the specific of the show and find things that are useful for the room, so that they can say, oh, I learned something today that I can apply to my show. So let me ask you a specific question. What contract did you use equity actors at Don't Tell Mamas? Or did you do the whole thing non-equity?
The actors were the writers. Sam Bolin was an equity actor, but the way that we were developing it at Don't Tell Mama was the writers, Sam and Mark, were the two performers in the show.
Okay, so that's one thing that other people are going to have a problem that you didn't have. So they're going to have a problem finding a contract that's going to be an affordable contract at Cabaret. Cabaret, equity doesn't get involved in Cabaret as long as it's songs. But once there's a script involved, and once there's characters and elements that really make it more than a Cabaret. What?
No, I guess I'm
Jeffrey Lyle Siegel, please, please.
No, it's 3/4 of a mile.
Jeffrey Lyle Siegel, please turn your mic off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so anyway, nope, he's back on.
There we go.
Okay, so what we need to know, as people that have shows that we think that Cabaret is going to be a great way to develop them, we need to know what the steps are. And you just told us one thing, that one advantage you have that not everybody will have. As if we're doing just songs at a Cabaret, probably don't need to use an equity contract. If we're using songs in a script, equity will want to have some say in it. So that's one way.
I can speak to a few different, because having gone through various versions of the show, we've kind of explored every version of how you can work with equity at the Cabaret level. And, there are, first of all, it should be said that, like, unless you're really doing a real run of something, there are lots of opportunities to do things with equity on codes that are not contracts. Because the second you're dealing with contracts, you're talking payroll and insurance and all those things that get very expensive and complicated.
Well, there's a cabaret code, there's a showcase
Well,
code.
the cabaret, that's actually a contract. The cabaret contract, we actually utilized that in Provincetown when we did the show. And the cabaret contract is a weird beast. It's a promulgated contract by equity, meaning they've never had to negotiate it with any sort of formal governing negotiating body. And so there are aspects of it that are wonderful, and then there are aspects of it that are sort of confounding. But prior to that, I mean, you know, whether it's a showcase code or a staged reading code or a backers audition code, these are all, I think, we never did a showcase code with Midnight, but I think we used both the staged reading and the backers audition code at different times for it. All of those are opportunity. If you're doing one night or 3 nights at a cabaret of your show, you could absolutely do it on a staged reading code. You know, there's not really. Now, I guess the only complication would be the potential advertising component of that, but that's, you know, if that was an important piece to you, the showcase code would allow you to do that. And
yeah, the reading code, the other problem with the reading code is that equity requires that the actors be on book. They're not supposed to be off book.
That's true. And the showcase code does not.
No, yeah, showcase code would be it, probably.
Yeah, it probably would be. That's correct.
And the great thing about, because I've used the showcase code, I did a three performance reading of a show of mine on the showcase code, but I did it as a staged reading. I used the showcase code so that I could have 125 hours of rehearsal, and I did it with them on book and just a little bit of staging so that it wouldn't cost much money. So I was able to do that for about $9,000.
Yeah, I know quite a few people as of late that have used the showcase code for reading purposes for that same reason, to be able to expand rehearsal time, and also the fact that, you know, with the staged reading, it has to be private invitation only, whereas the showcase you can promote and, you know, all of that. So
I want to go back to Sherry and Sidney, who have a broad overview of the cabaret world.
I have a question though.
All right.
Chase, when and Max, when you first presented it at Don't Tell Mama, I guess it was after Nymph.
No, prior to.
Oh, prior to.
Well, both. Honestly, both.
Yeah, both. We did it. We did that one night thing.
Yeah.
I saw it someplace on West 42nd Street. What was that? Was that part of
that? That was the Nymph version. That was yeah.
Anyway, did you have an idea to expand it? So many people have properties that they want to possibly produce, but can't they test the waters in a cabaret space without troubling themselves with equity contracts or codes?
Well, the complication is equity's jurisdiction is attached to narrative. Basically, when there is an actual script narrative, they actually start to have jurisdiction. So now, obviously, there are lots of times where there are small things done where equity doesn't really get concerned. But, you know, if you're doing something in one of the kind of name recognized cabaret spaces in New York City, and you're doing an actual book musical in that format, and you have equity actors, you really should be working with equity in some capacity. But
I've seen so many shows at Don't Tell Mama, at Pangea, where they're presented as cabaret shows without any idea that they could move.
Yeah. I think that the key that Max mentioned about Mark and Sam, our writers, being the performers is a key component of it as well. Because it allowed them, when they were doing it at Don't Tell Mama, to for us to treat it as they're just doing their cabaret show, even though we knew that we're doing a musical.
But no one else has to know.
And I think that's true of a lot of people that sort of write a script for their cabaret piece. I mean, I would certainly say every time I've seen Sidney Myer live, it feels like a complete production to me. You know, it feels like a show with a story, right? But it's you know, equity's never going to come after Sidney Myer and say he should put his contract, you know, his cabaret on a contract.
Don't say never.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Um,
I've seen so many
well,
shows that
I want
tell
to go
us.
back to the other
Oh,
thing
okay.
that's implicit in what you were just talked about. Midnight at the Never Get is really a 2-character, which became a 3-character piece. Sidney and Sherry, can you think of other shows that may have been developed in Cabaret that had larger casts? Because I know that people,
Nonsense.
yeah,
Well,
and
the Kathy and Mo show
Right,
started
right.
at Don't Tell Mama,
well,
but
that was
that's
just
2
Kathy and Mo.
characters.
That's two.
Right. Well, very much so. Yes.
But
One of my favorites.
Forever Plaid at Paulson's, which is
That was
now
4.
Friday.
I think it's a 4-character, Paulson's.
That's 4. Yes.
And also
And
it has some
recently,
development at the Triad as well.
just this month, there have been 4 performances of Forbidden Sondheim, which is the latest version, which started in the early 1980s, of Forbidden Broadway by Gerard Alessandrini at Don't Tell Mama. And there were 5 people, cast members in that. And that's still going strong.
And that is tied more to the review format than to the book musical. Because again, I'm going back to the room. I'm going back to the people I know who are here in the room who have shows, they're book musicals, and they're thinking that a good way to do this might be to start it out, to try out material at a cabaret. And I agree. I think it is a good idea. It's just that it's more complicated than.
Or if there are songwriters in the room, it's a great way for them. I know Richard Maltby is your guest next week.
You were going to talk a little bit about Cabaret
with
Richard.
information.
Yeah.
But he and David Shire had written some songs while they were in college. They produced it under one name, and then it started out in a cabaret room at Manhattan Theater Club. And then when they moved it to Barbara Ann's on West 46th Street, it became Starting Here, Starting Now. So
I think Sherry has arrived at something that I've been hoping to say with this, which is that I think that cabaret can be a great way to develop theater. I think more so, cabaret is an incredible way to develop relationships between talent, so artists, and their audience. I think it's actually kind of dangerous to think of cabaret in a broad sense as a way to develop theater. I think that can be really nurturing for the creators, but not the audiences. And I have grown up in a generation where pretty much every writer that I know has presented either themselves or their work in these rooms. Certainly a great person to talk about is Joe Iconis, who has been very, very hesitant to present his theater pieces in these cabarets, but has become incredibly well known for presenting his artistry in these cabaret rooms. I think that there's development fatigue that audiences feel, and audiences need to be nurtured. And I think that a lot of times the work that I was also a waiter. I'll just be completely candid. I was a waiter at Don't Tell Mama for many years. We have to be really careful as artists about what we charge money for. If people are going to sit down and they're going to pay a $15 cover, a $25 cover, a $75 cover at 54 Below, they really shouldn't be sitting and watching something that is not ready. And certainly they shouldn't be sitting and watching something that is under rehearsed, or as so many of these concert presentations or stage readings are. So I think that really a much more important thing to think about is the content of your piece lending itself to the milieu that you're presenting it in. If you have written a very dark chamber musical, you know, like, are people going to be well served by being charged that cover charge, you know, having a full dinner while they enjoy your piece, you know, having waiters milling about. What we were creating, and part of why I think we were successful in creating something that way, was because of what we were creating. It made sense there. It fit there. It was designed to be there. And so I think that, you know, I was very excited when Sherry asked me to be a part of this, largely because I think it's important to say that we as artists, we have a responsibility to the audience, and we have to be really careful that the main thing we're thinking about is this a cheap way to do my show? You know, it's an important thing to think about, but it's also important to think about, are you nourishing your audience by presenting your work in this cabaret, or are you nourishing your own desire to present your work?
Well, I think that I mean I don't disagree with anything you said, Max, but I think this is another side of it. You mentioned 54 Below. 54 Below is dedicated to offer, and so and Joe's Pub. Both of them are dedicated to offering opportunities for new works to be showcased. New musicals are being showed. It's part of their series. I mean, they have a series of new works that are, you come in, you with your musical, and you do songs from it. I'm not sure. I think that theoretically people are just supposed to come in and do songs. I don't think that that's what happens. I think a lot of them come in and they do songs and connecting material, and there is a narrative, and it's not quite what they're pretending it is, but it's well received. There's an audience for it. There's an audience that loves that.
Sure. I think that more often than not, there is an audience that feels a responsibility to their friends. And I have spoken to, seriously, hundreds of people who don't want to see more, work that isn't ready to, the other thing is there's ways to do everything, right? Like, you can really create a dynamic evening of your work in development without presenting, a truncated 3-hour musical in a 60-minute concert. There's ways to do it right. And there's ways to do anything right. But more often than not, when I've sat and I've directed in the 54 Below New Work series, I've directed, at Joe's Pub, I have also seen, as an audience member, probably north of 100 musicals in concert in rooms like Don't Tell Mama and 54 Below and Joe's Pub that didn't belong there, and I think that that's just something to really be, for all the writers in the room, I would just really urge you to think about, is this an opportunity for me, or is this an opportunity for my audience, or both?
Well, there might be situations where a better option might be, or used to be, the York Theater's reading series, developmental reading series. We also have I should say that TRU also has a developmental reading series, but but there's also musical theater workshop.
And readings are great, and readings can be, I am not putting down the idea of developing work in any way, shape, or form. I think that many, I've seen so many really great presentations of new work in rooms at Shetler Studios, with no lights and no drinks and no, and I was
just at Beau today at noon today.
Yeah, and and it's and even in cases where I have, I think that, like, places like the York and different theater, Musical Theater Factory, where I was a founding member, they presented so many readings. I saw a Strange Loop it was like in a Musical Theater Factory originated in a porn studio in a building on 40th Street. And their very first full draft reading of A Strange Loop was there. And it was a $10 ticket price. And it was not in a cabaret. And it was one of the most thrilling nights I have ever spent as an audience member, because they were thinking about what they were putting in front of us. And did it make sense there, and that
Ross,
went to win the Pulitzer.
Ross, it's now 6:28. So I think if there are questions in the room, please let us know.
Okay, I just have one, but I'm not sure if it's been answered yet. It was what is the maximum amount of actors a cabaret show can handle?
That's a good. Well, it depends on the size. It depends on the cabaret room. It depends on the size of the stage. It's very simple, and it depends on how many actors you have on the stage at the same time.
I got 11 musicians on the stage at Don't Tell Mama.
This is not a theater question. It's a physics question.
Yeah.
11 people, Max.
It was crazy, but it looked cool. It wasn't all actors. It was like a band, so we were able to it was like a little staging architecture project. We were like,
oh, I mean, there was even a concern. I produced a 10-character musical a while ago, and we were concerned about it fitting on the stage at the York. No, but 10 was fine on the York stage. I don't know if it would have fit in Don't Tell Mama, but
you know what I find interesting? What Max said about a connection to people. that songwriters have to build up that connection by presenting their songs. Wasn't it Joe? I don't remember who. The show ended up on Broadway. Was it Be More Chill? Where
Yes, it was.
Yeah. They sold all these CDs. People just knew it by the social media frenzy and the albums that were being sold. And it was
Reference my YouTube filming of Joe Iconis's interview with me about Be More Chill. It wasn't all positive for him, but it was an opportunity. And also the audiences that he managed to get inadvertently, he wasn't even working on doing it. The inadvertent audiences that he was getting on YouTube and social media did not ultimately translate into audiences for a Broadway show. So it's a little different. There are lessons to be learned. I mean, on all of these projects and all of these success stories, there are things to be learned and things that are probably to be aware of and avoided.
And Sidney mentioned Jonathan Larson earlier, and I think that's another really good point of reference, because when Jonathan Larson was creating what became Rent and also working on his musical Superbia, it wasn't those pieces that he was presenting in Cabaret. He was presenting, much like Maltby and Shire had before him, reviews of his work, and those reviews led to the folks at New York Theater Workshop and beyond seeing his work and realizing that he was a talent that needed to be nurtured. And that is how Rent came to the stage. It wasn't that he said, oh, let me put Rent up at, Village Gate. He said, let me perform at the Village Gate and do what became Tick, Tick, Boom as a, monologue. And I think that that's, just a really valuable thing to think about. It wasn't Jason Robert Brown wasn't saying, let me do let me try to fit, 14 actors on a stage at Don't Tell Mama and do Parade. It was, let me create songs for New World. And that led obviously to him meeting Hal Prince and getting Parade done. So I just think there's so many ways to use these spaces, but it is about intentionality.
Well, let me open it up to the room at this point. Let me encourage the room to come up. I mean, you must have questions, because I'm not sure that everything that we presented today was what you were hoping to hear. So talk to us. Do you all know how to do virtual hand raises?
I also have another question that was sent to me, Bob, actually.
Okay, good.
Who should we pitch individual cabaret songs to? Parentheses, mostly comedic.
What for the purpose of what? For the purpose of getting your songs performed? I'm not sure. I'm not sure any of us can answer that, because I'm not sure we understand the context.
Yes, Bob. To get our work out there, to get our songs performed by, in cabarets.
Oh, that's creating relationships with cabaret performers. That's basically buddying up with people that sing in cabarets and then saying, can I show you a song of mine?
Also, if you want to get songs out, a great way to do it, or a lot of the cabaret rooms have open mic evenings.
But not all of us perform our work. I can't perform. I can't perform my own songs.
Well, no, then you have a
Singer
singer perform your songs.
Yeah.
That's been done. That's been going on for years and years and years.
Vinny, it might be a question of
and those open mics those are the people you want to hear your songs, to sing them, is the folks who come to those open mics. So I think that that's a great avenue to get your songs performed, is to have them heard by the performers. And one way to do that is an open mic, and certainly another way to do that is YouTube.
Vinny, there's a better answer for you, because I'm not sure whether Atlanta has the cabaret scene that we have here. I don't know.
Certainly not.
True.
No, not at all. I mean,
oh, okay. That's why we talk about it so easily, and you're struggling with it. Yeah.
Where is Vinny? Where is she located?
She's in Atlanta.
Oh,
yes, Atlanta. But there are good things here too.
There sure are. Atlanta is increasingly one of the larger hubs of media creation in America, and I think that they're probably, while we in New York may not think that there's cabaret there the way that we think of it, I'm sure there is.
I
The
think
Alliance,
it's
the Alliance doesn't have some sort of offshoot of like a cabaret evening or
they
anything?
tried it, and I'm going to bug them to try it again.
Bug them, right?
Ed Levy, can you do me a favor? Can you
Thanks.
ask your question? Because I think you typed it in a way that I don't think it's saying what you thought it was saying. Ed Levy?
I would like to jump in and just say, for anyone who wants to meet cabaret performers, get a discount to see cabaret shows, there is the Manhattan Association of Cabarets, MAC, and it is a treasure trove of panels, discussions, performers, MAC open mics, awards to cabaret performers and cabaret songwriters. So they should investigate MAC NYC.
And you don't have to live in Manhattan to be a part of it either. So like, Vinny, you in Atlanta could join MAC, and that gives you access to an internet portal, you know, that you can send your songs to, and then all the members of MAC will see them. Or, you know,
Great.
they won't necessarily click on them, but they'll see them.
It's a
I'll
great
check it
way
out.
for producers to discover new talent.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Ed Levy, I'll say it one more time. I would ask your question, but I don't understand your question. So do you want to just ask it?
Yes. If somebody has something that really is a book show, like let's take Gypsy as an example, how would you do that as in cabaret, or is it not appropriate to do a show like that in cabaret?
Well, we were shy about saying what size cast would fit in a cabaret room, and I can tell you that Gypsy won't. But
well, no, I don't
let's-
mean in terms of size. I mean in terms of its proportion of book to song.
Just do a concert version of it. Just select a certain number of songs and have a narrator tell the story. I just went to a revival of a show from the, oh my gosh, the 70s called, was it Rheingold or Das
Rheingold? Yeah,
Das Rheingold with Andre de Shields.
hilarious.
They did that concert version at the Laurie Beachman Theater, and it was beautifully done. Oh, of course, Andre de Shields was magnificent, but the whole production was magnificent. The songs were terrific. There was talent there.
No, Das Barbecue. Was it? I might be wrong. Was it Das Barbecue?
It's a
Was it Das Barbecue?
parody.
Das Barbecue. That's what it. Okay. No, I don't know what it is.
Based on the Wagner opera.
Das Barbecue. That's what it is.
But this was different. This is Barry Keating who wrote it.
Oh, okay.
And it was called Rheingold.
Das Rheingold is the opera name.
I guess I'm saying that if you have what's really a book show, are you doing it justice by listening to, you're sort of listening to a cast album. And it's great to listen to cast albums, but it's not really the show.
What are the songs?
He means if you're just doing the songs.
Yeah,
No,
my answer is a question, which is, what are the songs like? You know, are they very diegetic? Are they very, you know, is there a lot of sung dialogue? You know, you want to think about, is the audience going to be able to get the full experience, or at least a full experience, you know, maybe not the full experience that you would get hearing all of the book spoken, but are they going to walk out feeling like, I have, in that 60 minutes or in that 75 minutes, or, you know, don't keep people in a cabaret for 90 minutes, but you know, people do it, but are they going to walk out of there feeling like they had a full experience, or are they going to leave scratching their head saying, those songs were good, but I had no idea what was going on? You know, another way can be really to remove the notion of the cast or the characters from it. You know, if the song, like Gypsy, you can, you know, give a different performer each song from Gypsy, and then they're just great songs that were written by Julie Stein and Stephen Sondheim. They, you know, you don't need to know anything about strippers or burlesque or vaudeville to know that You'll Never Get Away From Me is a great song. You hear it and you know that's a great song. Everything's Coming Up Roses. You hear it and that's just a great song, and that can lend itself beautifully to a concert. It's really more about, you know, is what I'm presenting going to leave people wanting more in a exciting way, or is it going to leave them wanting more in a disappointing way?
I think, Max, you're totally right about that. One of the things, because you know, the second you put producer anywhere near your name, you get invited to things constantly. And I have seen many, to that point, many a sort of reduced musical in a cabaret setting like that. And you know, I often find that the versions that are most successful are either the versions that just completely make no attempt to tell the story at all, because they just accept the fact that we can't tell this 2.5 hour musical story in 50 minutes, or the ones that the music tells enough of the story that you're able to kind of get the overview of it. But
take the next left onto Knock Knolls Road.
Jeffrey, not again. Jeffrey. Oh my goodness.
But I think the point is to just be realistic with yourself about what the material is, and like there is probably a way to present practically everything in the cabaret form, but what that looks like is going to be different for every show.
Well, I'm not going to need to wind up, except that Susan Crawford does have her hand up, and I don't know if Ed has his hand up again, or whether it's the same from before. But Susan, I know that you were specifically developing something at Don't Tell Mama, so please ask your question. Susan Crawford?
Oops, sorry. Do I go on video too or not?
It's up to you. You can come in. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So if I'd heard all of this...
Wait, you're not on video. You're at the top of your head. There we are.
If I'd heard all of this 6 months ago, I would have a completely different question for you. But we've been sending our musical around to producers who tell us, let us know when you have a reading. And then we had a reading, which was not meant to be, a reading for them to come here, but for us to hear it. And in the wake of the reading, right after that, so the reading was in June, and right after that, I was in another workshop where cabaret contract came up in a discussion, and I thought, oh, what's that? And so I followed up with a question, and then I talked to Equity, and our accompanist with whom we've been working throughout recording the whole show works at Don't Tell Mama. So she said, well, you could do it there. And in fact, we are doing the whole show in a 90-minute version, which was okay with Equity. I don't know that we'll be using Equity actors. So one question is, if we're not, do we even need an Equity contract? And it was okay with Don't Tell Mama to do 90 minutes. I do have to cut it down somewhat, which I did with the other show I had produced last year, which was a play. But having said all that, what advice do you have? Because
First of all, Susan, give them a clue. How many characters are in your show?
It has 8, but we're only working with 7 plus the pianist.
Okay.
And it's a show about opening a nightclub in Hell's Kitchen. So as we say in our publicity, what better place than to put it in a nightclub in Hell's Kitchen? And our real objective is to get these producers we've been talking to show up and see it. And we had looked into, or we know people who've done concert versions or who've done stage readings who spent a fortune on them. And this is something we can actually manage, just with the Equity scale.
Come back to your question, because I've lost it at this point.
Having said all of that, do you have any advice?
Oh.
We've already booked the theater. It's going to be 90 minutes. It's going to be the whole story, but slightly shortened version. And Max
let them answer.
Okay.
Lean into the experience that the audience is going to have as much as you possibly can. It's clear that you want to give the full story of your show. Just remember what they're going to be. I often say, Chase has responsibility to the investors. I have responsibility to the audience. That's what the director, I think, does. Is they're there to sit in for the audience. I would encourage you to work with somebody. I don't know if you've hired a director but just work with somebody or make yourself the somebody who is every step of the way going to be thinking about the audience's experience of it. Because as you said, your intention is to have these producers see it. When they see it, it won't matter if they see it if they don't have a good experience and if the audience around them is not having a good experience. So as much as you're thinking about developing your show, think about developing the evening that you're presenting this time around. Don't think too much about what it might look like in a theater, 6 months or a year from now. Think about what it is going to look and feel like in that room on that night. That's my number one piece of advice.
Great,
Okay.
Wait,
Thank you.
you know who did that beautifully? Tova Felchu was involved in a musical about Leona Helmsley.
Queen of Mean.
Yeah.
Lean is
Queen.
mean.
Queen of
Queen
Mean.
of
Queen of
Queen of
Mean.
Mean, right. And the show could not get capitalized. And Tova had invested so much time and energy into it. And she thought the music was so terrific that she and the musical director, along with her director, Jeff Harner, put together a cabaret version of the show and presented it at 54 Below. So following along with what Max just said, created for Cabaret, and then see what happens.
So I'm going to take away from this the fact that Sherry, Chase, Max, and Sidney are able to stay past 6:30. So I'm going to wind up right now. But guys, don't go away because I'm going to come back in the room and we can talk a little bit more. But I'm going to wind up for YouTube right now. So I'm going to thank everybody for being with us. I want to thank my guests, Sherry Eaker, dear friend of mine, Sidney Myer, another dear friend of mine, Chase and Max. Two new friends of mine, I hope. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for everybody for coming every darned week for 175 weeks. Good grief. And also, I want to point out the fact that pre-COVID, before I started doing this on Zoom, we were a New York-based organization and we were pretty New York-centric. Zoom has forced me to actually put TRU out there to the whole world. And just judging from today alone, you can tell that we have people here from Australia. We have people from all over the country. We get people here from Malaysia, Singapore, UK, of course, all over the place. And so I'm very grateful. I'm very, very grateful to COVID. Thank you, COVID, for expanding my company and expanding my view of the world. I wanted to also let everybody out there know that if you're just finding us, just discovering TRU, we're an arts service organization. We're a not-for-profit, 501c3 not-for-profit company that is dedicated to helping people navigate the business of theater. And specifically, we try to help producers as well as self-producing artists. So I'd love you to come and be part of us. If you want to be in the room and ask questions and be part of the conversation, I can make that happen. All you have to do is email me. Email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com. Oh, okay. So the other thing that I want to mention is that we've been doing this as a community service for 3 years, and we're happy to do it. And we're happy to welcome people in the room for free. We are a pay-as-you-can event. So if you can pay something, please do pay something because we have to pay bills. If you want to donate and help us continue going strong and healthy and financially sound, you can go to TRUDonate, TRUDonate.com. That's TRUDonate.com. Anything you give will be really, really appreciated. I hope you'll come back next week and join us when I'm talking to Richard Maltby, who's one of my favorite lyricists in the whole world. And I'm very thrilled to have him as a guest. And we have other interesting people coming throughout October and November and the rest of my life.